Greetings and welcome back, gentles and ladiesmen, to another, Dragorific. This Let's Play is really dragon. I'll be here all week. Before we move on any further, I want to show this off. You actually get a new cutscene.
Cool, Flash, do that again.
The artisan's boss is through a portal behind me. You can challenge him now, if you feel you are ready.
Alright. Now we can go fight the boss, that being Toasty. So... last time we met, we kicked off the Artisan's World. We basically did most of it. All that's left is this boss stage. And I talked a little bit about the story. I sort of described the gameplay a little bit and what the appeal is for me. Probably go into a bit more detail on that, actually. It's probably what we'll do, but, you know. So, in terms of what we're doing in these stages, that's never happened to me before, I swear. Before we go any further, these enemies here, these dogs, are actually some of the most devious in the game. And it's a very simple idea. First time you flame or charge them, you piss them off, and then after that, they will try to jump on you and flatten you. Compare this to the enemies in like Spyro: A Hero's Tale, where none of the enemies are a threat at all. And the game feels really boring, and the combat feels really pointless. In this game, enemies will fuck you up, so you've got to take care of them. And as you notice, they drop gems when they die, but as you remember from our story analysis, all of these enemies are... the gems are the enemies. Like, Nasty Nork's magic transformed the gems into the enemies, so by defeating the enemies, we are recovering the treasure. Which gives you a nice incentive to kill everything, because otherwise you would just run past them. So now you do have to figure out how to fight the enemies, and the enemies, you know, can be built into the level design in interesting ways and stuff like that, and keep getting hit by the fucking dogs, even though I was showing off my foolproof strategy for defeating them, supposedly. Yeah, gems, I love secondary collectibles and collectathon games. In fact, in my opinion, they make or break the experience. A good secondary collectible can really elevate a collectathon experience, in my opinion.
Nasty Nork has put one of his most devious henchmen in charge of the artisan world.
Bring him on. Barbecue.
Be careful, Spyro. This boss has many tricks up his sleeve.
Sorry about the audio cutting out there, but sometimes the OSSC can get a little flaky with that, and there's not really anything I can do about it. I guess I could try recording the audio directly with the card with the, you know, the Elgato has a 3.5mm jack on it, and I could try that next time, but who knows how that would mess with the sync. I'll think about it. I've already had to redo this playthrough once. I'm not redoing it again because of that little drop in audio. Hey, it's better than trying to play Spyro 2 on a PS3. I swear that there are audio problems up the ass with Spyro 2 on PS3. And if you've seen the Game Mavericks one, you know what I'm talking about, where like certain lines of dialogue won't play properly and all that kinds of crap. Sparks the Dragonfly, he's following us around. He's a glorified health meter. He goes through several states, yellow, blue, green, and then after that he will die. And the only way to bring Sparks back, and we've completed this world by the way, is to kill butterflies.
Well done, Spyro. I didn't think you could do it. You may travel to the Peacekeeper's world if you like.
Head on to the next world. That's basically the name of the game. The any % experience of Spyro the Dragon is pretty shallow, in my opinion. It is not like Super Mario 64 or even something like Sunshine or Jack, or Banjo-Kazooie for that matter, where you feel like you get a pretty satisfying run of the game just by, even if you're doing a complete
Welcome to Peacekeeper, Spyro. Look how our treasure has been turned against us and stolen. Recover our treasure, Spyro.
Collect treasure. Got it.
What's my train of thought? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, so usually the any percent completion experience for most collectathons is not, you know, the best way to play the game in my opinion. I think you really do have to be a completionist type to enjoy this genre. But with Spyro 1 in particular, it lacks the menace of Gruntilda from Banjo-Kazooie, where you just, by the end of the game, you really want to just kick her ass, and it feels so satisfying to see her tumble down her tower at the end. But this game, not so much. The plot, like I said, is, you know, pretty bare bones. I don't know, maybe bare bones isn't the right word, but it's you know, this is not a super story-driven game with a very complicated narrative. And in terms of the conditions you have to meet in order to progress to the next world, they're very easy, I guess is the point, especially if you're a completionist type like me. Maybe if you're like a little kid playing this for the first time, you've never played a collectathon before, maybe you would enjoy the any percent experience more than I would.
Hi, Spyro! Sparks the Dragonfly has been doing a good job protecting you. Make sure to keep him strong by feeding him lots of butterflies.
Lost my train of thought again. Yes, but, you know, the problem with this game is the conditions are way too easy to fulfill. Like, here's our next balloonist here.
Well, Magic Crafter's world is far away and very dangerous. Maybe if you find 1,200 stolen treasure, I'll show it to you.
So we don't have enough yet. We're pretty close though, and that's just for me fully completing one world. So I guess you kind of have to try, but still not really. I am of the opinion that I'm never gonna not do a completionist run of a collectathon game, because that, in my opinion, is the way that they are meant to be played. This is a genre for completionists. And, you know, Spyro, in that sense, Spyro 1 succeeds really well. Where it fails in the minimalist sense, it succeeds with flying color, you know, any percent sense, I mean. It succeeds with flying colors in the completionist department. Spyro the Dragon 1, out of the 3 games, is by far my least, by far my most favorite to 100%. Because of how, like I was saying in the previous episode, because of how straightforward it is to 100%. This game is built for speedrunning in a way that Spyro 2 and 3 just aren't. It is so simple to come back. It's very much just you focus on finding the fastest route through the stage, and you try to do it as fast as possible to 100% the game as fast as possible. And that's really fun to me, trying to find those 1 or 2 little steps to save that much amount of time. And that's what makes this first game, that's the game's greatest strength in my opinion, is that it is straightforward and therefore easy to speedrun.
Well done, Spyro! Keep up the good work, and I know you'll fulfill your destiny!
Destiny? I just want to kick some—
Just toast those enemies and collect the treasure!
I'm Clancy Brown! I voice every dragon in this game!
I have nothing against Clancy Brown, by the way. He's done some good work. He's a bit overrated if I'm being honest, but, you know, still a fine voice actor nonetheless. But he really can only do 2 voices. He can do the calm and collected Dr. Cortex voice, or he can do the I'm Mr. Krabs! Or I'm Baron Praxis! He has 2 modes, and those are the ones. And I think he's in Starship Troopers? Like, he does live action acting in that movie. I don't know what he sounds like, if he has, like, a normal voice, quote-unquote. It's probably just Dr. Cortex. But, you know, he can only really do 2 voices. And, yeah, he voices a lot of dragons in this game, so it gets old, is all I'm saying. By the way, that dithering is beautiful, isn't it? Anyways. So this game, lots of fun to speedrun, come back to it all the time. And I didn't used to think that. I used to very much be in the camp that felt like Spyro 1 was, because of how different it is from the sequels in many ways. I used to be in the camp that this is the worst game in the trilogy, or that this one is like by far not as good or something. But the first time I played it, I was kind of bored with it because of how surface level the story is in some ways, and because of the fact that there were no mini games or any other optional stuff to break up the pace. But then coming back to it for a second playthrough about a year and a half ago, I completely changed my mind when I realized just how much fun it is to speedrun and how straightforward it is to fully complete.
Thank you for releasing me.
I think that's Greg Berger. Greg Berger, I'm pretty sure he was one of the Cobra Unit guys from Metal Gear Solid 3. But he plays a big role in the Spyro franchise, as you'll see going forward. He plays Ripto in the second and fourth game, and he plays Hunter in all of the second, third, and fourth games. I don't know. And then you get to Hero's Tale, and they just stop trying to, honor continuity altogether. But first 4 games at least were pretty, I don't know. And I don't know, there are things I really like in Spyro 2 and 3, and one of those 2 games is my favorite in the series, after all. But, in terms of which would I rather be playing at any given time, you can't beat Spyro 1.
Is that you, Spyro? Are you the young dragon I've been hearing so much about? Ever since you're a wee puff of smoke, we've known,
You've known?
I forget.
You might have noticed by now that Spyro 1 has a thing for old people jokes. There are a lot of old people jokes in this game. I'm not kidding when I say that. That's not hyperbole. I know, it's not as grating as Hero's Tale, which had a lot of that too. In fact, the portrayal of Spyro is actually very similar between the Hero's Tale and this game. Because I guess it's time to talk about this. Spyro himself, you may have noticed he's voiced by someone different than he's voiced by in 2 and 3 and 4, which is his most known, voice performance. Spyro in this game was voiced by Carlos Alazraqui, who you may know as, he's done a lot of stuff. He is a very prolific voice actor, but you may know him as the Taco Bell Chihuahua. He voices Spyro in this game, and I don't know, either him or Jess Harnell in who would later go on to voice Crash Bandicoot, by the way. Jess Harnell in Hero's Tale. I prefer that kind of voice for Spyro. This kind of,
Hi, I'm Spyro the Dragon.
I prefer that kind of sound from Spyro, because it just makes more sense with the kind of character they're trying to build in these games. Tom Kenny in 2, 3, and 4 is fine. He does a good job. He's the voice of SpongeBob, so he knows what he's doing. Lots of Nickelodeon crossover with Spyro series and Crash series. But I don't know, Tom Kenny just kind of sounds like Tom Kenny. I buy Carlos Alazraqui and Jess Harnell more as Spyro, and Spyro as a character is very interesting in my opinion, because in most games,
Dry Canyon rewards good gliders. You are a good glider, eh, Spyro?
I was born to glide.
Spyro, like I said, the idea of this character is that he's kind of a brat, kind of a little vain. He's kind of a little kid. He hasn't really grown up yet, and he's kind of desperate to prove himself. Because as the conversations with the dragons implies, they don't have a whole lot of respect for him. They think he's a troublemaker. The manual implies that he plays hooky. I'm not sure what he plays hooky from.
Incredible glide, Spyro. I thought I'd be stuck here forever with those ugly vultures standing on my head. Those birds might look tough, but they're pretty tasty. flame broiled with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, that was also Greg Berger. He's basically doing his Hunter voice there. And that's the idea of Spyro, is he's just, you know, this story is a coming-of-age story. It's about Spyro's greatest weakness, his small size, and, you know, his diminutive stature, his lack of ability to fly, not selectively. Because of that, he avoids the spell, and he, you know, because of being who he is, he's put in this unique position to prove himself and to save, you know, his family. That, to me, is a lot more interesting than Crash Bandicoot will ever be. I'm sorry, Crash Bandicoot has no character. He is as boring as a plank of wood. I don't care if he's expressive in his animations. That's better than nothing, I guess. But you could replace Crash Bandicoot with pretty much anything, and the effect would be the same, because he has no character. Like, you could, like, I'm pretty sure when the game was in development, Naughty Dog's original idea was Willy the Wombat. The game could have starred Willy the Wombat, and it would have made no difference. But that's not the point, and I'm sure I've pissed off a lot of people already, so... The point is, usually when you play a video game, and usually dragons in video games are like the final boss, or a big enemy that you have to overcome. Like, even as far back as like Dragon's Lair from the 80s, the idea is that, you know, the dragon has kidnapped the princess, you gotta infiltrate the dragon's lair and save her, and stuff like that. Spyro, in a very clever way, flips the script on that and says, here's a game where you play as a dragon, which is interesting gameplay-wise, because it's fun. The idea of playing as a dragon is a very fun one on its own, because you can fly, you could breathe fire, you could charge through enemies with your horns, all things that the game uses very effectively in all three games, and pretty much every game Spyro's been in. And, you know, the levels are very well built around that, and you just feel like a powerhouse, but at the same time, they kind of subvert that even further. Not only are you playing as a dragon, but you're playing as a young kind of dragon that people don't really respect, and you've got to go out and, you know, strut your stuff, show everyone who's boss and whatnot. And that's interesting, that's fun. And, yeah. And I think that on its own is enough to make Spyro a more interesting character than Crash Bandicoot. Crash Bandicoot is a rejected, and the only reason I'm making the comparison between Crash and Spyro is because, you know, they were popular around the same time. Crash sold by far more. It's pretty hard to argue with the numbers on that one. Spyro did pretty well for its time as well, but it was not nearly as monolithic as Crash was, and is to this day. And, you know, part of that, I guess, has to do with, you know, the whole collectathon genre being kind of niche in some ways. And I feel like there's a huge misunderstanding for this genre and what the appeal is supposed to be. People keep blaming it for being something it's not, which is, you know, linear obstacle courses. That's not what this genre is, that's not what the appeal is. The appeal is different, and, you know, and obviously if the appeal is not for you, that's one thing, but people seem to act like collectathon game design is inherently aged, which we'll talk more about later, trust me. But, you know, Crash... Basically what Crash did is it took things that worked in 2D before and put them in 3D without really, you know, thinking about whether that works all the way in 3D.
How's a dragon supposed to flame metal armor anyway?
Remember, Spyro, flame won't harm metal, but charging with your horns, that should do the trick.
It's probably Clancy Brown's best line in the game. But Spyro, on the other hand, I feel is much more... I don't know, in many ways, Mario 64 kind of laid the groundwork, you know, laid out the blueprints for this game to happen and to succeed. But I feel like this did a lot more to further the cause of 3D game design than Crash ever did. Crash just is basically a side-scroller in 3D in every possible sense. Spyro is a 3D game from top to bottom, all the way around, up and down and all around. There you go. Obligatory Sonic reference for the day. And Yeah, and because of that, I think it's aged much better than Crash has. Crash, even with the remake, it's I don't know. But the point is that Crash has always been, you know, the big one. Spyro has always been kind of in his shadow from pretty much since the beginning. And I don't know, so that's why I'm drawing the comparison. I think that if we're gonna talk about which character is more interesting, I think it's definitely Spyro. Between the fact that he is a dragon, which is interesting, and, you know, mechanics and level design and everything are built around that concept, to, you know, just the idea, his actual, you know, character development and progression itself, I think that that's much more appealing, in my opinion, than a guy who doesn't talk at all, and who likes to dance, and who has kind of a weird looking face, and whose special ability is spinning just because. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, what's on the other side of that river?
Why don't you glide there and find out?
I like that guy's voice. I wish you could come back in more games.
And speaking of which, some of the dragons do actually reappear in later games. Like, you might have remembered that one guy in Artisans, his name is Tomas. And Tomas, when you save him, he says, press the X button in midair to glide. Oh, and don't be afraid. That one. Tomas actually becomes a dragon elder, or at least a very similar looking dragon named Tomas. Comes back in Spyro Hero's Tale and Shadow Legacy. It's the same character in both games, as one of the dragon elders. And I'm pretty sure more of the dragon elders from this game come back in that game as well, in that role. So, yeah. Kind of interesting that that's the only aspect of continuity that Hero's Tale really seemed to understand, but, you know, there'll be plenty of time to talk about that when I have to do that game for the channel. Hero's Tale is okay, but here we have another dragon up the top.
You've reached the highest point in Clifftown. You can
Great
get to
burger.
almost anywhere from here. If I were you, I'd use that whirlwind there.
And so, with that one little conversation, opened up several things that I think Spyro 1 does really well. And Spyro 2 and 3 do some of that too, but as you can see, when we first came here, that whirlwind wasn't there. Since we've reached that upper area and saved that dragon, now there is a whirlwind shortcut. And I really like the whirlwind shortcuts in this game because, once again, it just comes back to my point about how well Spyro 1 in particular cuts out all the fat and makes for a very straightforward collectathon gaming experience that, you know, that removes all the fluff. The game does not force you to redo a giant platforming section just to grab 1 or 2 gems you couldn't get earlier. They strategically place shortcuts and stuff like that so that you're not wasting your time, and I appreciate that. But even more importantly than that, it gets back to my point about how well this game furthered the cause of 3D game design, and how well it takes advantage of 3 dimensions. So, and that's one thing that this series does really well, is like I said, what I like about collectathons is the way that they make you think outside the box. And like that steel chest back there that we just broke and got, you know, stuff out of. Before, we couldn't break it, we couldn't do anything about it. But later on, we come up here and see that, oh, there's a rocket over there on that ledge. If I do a glide over there, and then I can get over there and get the rocket and then get the chest. You gotta think outside the box. You gotta use your noggin. You gotta exercise some lateral thinking, as I like to call it. And that's something that the Spyro series, the Spyro trilogy, does really well, is getting you to think about, oh, maybe if I glide behind this building, there might be a few gems that we haven't found yet. And that to me shows a mastery of 3D game design. In my opinion, Spyro the Dragon is a timeless game. This game has not aged a day. It is every bit as fun as it was back then. The only problem in that regard is that people misunderstand. You know, people seem to think that collectathons are inherently dated, which is something I don't agree with at all. But if you get past that, you'll see that this game is masterfully crafted. But enough about that for now. It's time to wrap up the episode. Join me next time. We're gonna go into the ice cavern and collect more gems, probably. It's probably a thing that will happen. So, until then, I'm Exio, and I'll see you guys next time.